So the thing is, everybody has the possibility to actually become a millionaire. And so have you ever heard about the slit experiment before? So the slit experiment was an experiment conducted by a physician, a scientist called Thomas. And this Thomas had a mission to study about light. And so basically what he did was he wanted to figure out how light would behave when you put it in a specific slit, right? So that's where it basically comes from. And so what he did was he essentially had two specific types of slits. So just imagine like two holes, right? And the same light just shining through both of the holes. And so from a logical perspective, right, we would imagine that that light would shine through both holes, creating essentially a circle as a as a reaction of the light going through the holes, right? So you basically see two dots, right? So just imagine for a moment. The issue was that this interesting experiment didn't show that at all, right? Logically, it didn't give the expected result that the Thomas, the scientist, would expect. So instead, what he saw was shattered lights, right? He saw specific like patterns. He saw as if there was a stone dropped on a pebble. And I literally quote that because that's the way it was described. And so in simple terms, Thomas figured out that light, or essentially the electrons that were shot through this slit, were waves, right? And so waves are very interesting because waves, waves like from the ocean, they behave in manners that we don't really know, right? Sometimes waves go left, right, they go up and down, they bend, sideways, they go in all sorts of directions. And so I want you to imagine that from such a basic principle, energy works the same way, right? And essentially that's energy, right? It's waves, right? Electrons. That was the experiment that was conducted by Thomas. And so before you click off because you're wondering like, how does this have anything to do with me becoming a millionaire? Let me explain. So throughout this experiment, when Thomas put a device that would observe the electrons, he made such an insane discovery. Thomas figured out that the moment he observed the energy, right, those vibrations or those lengths, those electrons, he figured out that those electrons took a static state, right? So he was able to figure out, okay, these electrons, when they are observed, they are in this state. Imagine state A, right? But when not observed, these electrons are basically in a physics perspective in a superposition. And so I don't want to dive too deep into this because I'm afraid that I might get some of the technicals wrong, but a superposition, right, in the perspective of quantum physics, because electrons, protons, and neutrons, as you guys know it, and as we all have learned this through primary school, they exist in the reality of quantum physics. And so quantum physics, you guys have probably seen in Ant-Man from Marvels, if you guys have watched Marvels before. And so Ant-Man explores this quantum universe, and the quantum universe or the quantum reality is basically an environment where everything is basically to its smallest state, right? Electrons, neutrons, and protons. So imagine the smallest thing you can think about in the universe. I'm sure that there's something smaller than that. But within the quantum reality, we do have proton, electrons, and neutrons, right? And so within the quantum reality, most of the electrons, the energy, they exist within a superposition, right? And so a superposition basically means that it does not have a static form. It does not have a specific state of form which it finds itself unless consciousness or observation is put to it. And so that's basically what Thomas's experiment proved. And I'm not making this up. You can literally Google this. It's the two slit experiment, and there it's probably elaborated even more on Google. But the reason why I'm saying this is because the question then boils down to is reality, or is reality, essentially the reality we live in, is it shaped by a consciousness, right? And so we could make a very basic claim that our reality is shaped by our consciousness. And, from a logical perspective, that makes sense, right? But even from a physics perspective, right, if we take the idea of a superposition, that means that your reality is created through the observation you make through it, right? And so from a very basic understanding, that would essentially mean that you could shape the reality you want to, right? And so there are a lot of people out there who believe that, their life is about one thing, or, like my parents asked me to, do this my entire life, or suddenly I decided to become, I don't know, some actor throughout my whole life. There are people out there who believe that, the reality of who they want to become is given to them. And based on those principles, from basic physics of what we just went through just now, that just doesn't really make sense, right? And so my point is that your reality is shaped by you, right? And so if we come back to the quantum physics theory, right, and these these electrons behaving from a superposition, that means that there are an infinite probability of possibilities of what your reality could be, right? Now let me repeat that, because from a superposition, that means that specific energy, that specific wavelength has not been created yet until you have put your observation to it. And so until then, everything is open. Every type of possibility of you doing or becoming, dying, living, becoming rich, successful, poor, or working, at the job you desire, being a student, failing, succeeding, every type of possibility based on those physics theory exists, right? So there's every type of reality. And so if you want to expand that a little bit more, some people believe that the moment you decide on one specific reality, right? This is a bit difficult and complex to explain, but bear with me. But the moment you choose a specific segment of reality, that basically means you collapse that reality into the reality you live in now. And so they believe that once a reality collapses, right, so the reality you live in right now, then other realities or other infinite possibilities exist furthermore. And so to give you an interesting image, if you guys have watched the Loki series from Marvel, there they talk about, that sacred timeline and time traveling and all of those stuff. So from a visual perspective, it does kind of make sense, right? Just imagine like you have a sacred timeline, and the reality that you live in is the reality you orchestrate, right? And so basically it's the same thing. And so if you want to talk about from a religious perspective as well, this kind of makes sense, because for the religious people out there, you guys have probably talked about or thought about the idea of fate and having things written about you, right? Your future, your presence, as well as who you're going to become. And so basically it's the same thing, because if you think about, imagine your reality is basically a set of library. Just imagine a big ass library, and there are infinite books, and just imagine like there's never ending sets of books, right? And so the reality is basically the specific book you choose from the library, and there's infinite, there's 99,999, not 999 types of books you can choose, and you choose that specific one. And so based from the basic argument of God, right, where somebody exists above time and space, because we are bound by the physics of time and space and gravity and the theory of relativity. And I made a separate video for this. You guys can check this out as well. It is for those reasons we are human, right? Because we live by the rules and boundaries of physics, right? And so from a religious perspective, like the idea of God, God obviously exists within, the laws of physics, but he's also the one who orchestrates, right, the laws of physics. So he essentially stands above it, right? And so it makes sense with that argument to why God knows your present, past, as well as your future, because in a reality where time is not relevant, Like, I know it sounds crazy and it doesn't really make sense, and to be honest, it doesn't. But it makes sense to why fate exists, because every type of reality exists already. It's about the reality that you choose. And again, like, God knows, which reality you're going to choose. And so, to conclude this video, if you want to become a millionaire, I want you to understand that every single person has the potential to become so. And I'm not saying this because I'm sugarcoating you, or I'm saying like, like you're smart or intelligent, or you have a set of benefits. Like, you might not even have that, but based on super simple principles of physics, everybody has the possibility to shape a specific reality where you can literally become and achieve anything you want to. And so just let that sit in, and just, have a thought about what I just said. And if you like this, I'll make more videos about this as well. But that would be it. Thank you guys.